Lecture 4. The reabsorption and secretion along different part of the nephron. راح تاخذ each part of the renal tubule and نشرح ايش يصير بينه اي انواع من الوتر او solute او الاملاح اللي راح يصير بها reabsorption and secretion which is different from part to part of the renal tubule. عادة tubular reabsorption is highly selective. It's unlike glomerular filtration rate which is non so selective. يعني تقريبا يعني بالنسبة للglomerular filtration كل المواد مثل ما قلنا تترشح ما عدا البلازما بروتين او المواد اللي مرتبطه بالبروتين وسبيشال ثينك اللي ذكرناها. بالنسبه للبروكسيمال tubular reabsorption normally about 65% of the filtered load of the sodium and water and slightly percentage of the filtered chloride will reabsorb by the proximal tubule before the filtrate will reach to the loop of Henle. بما أنه 65% من الووتر وبنفس الوقت من الصوديوم أيضا، إذا نفس البرسنتج اللي راح ينسحب منه صوديوم راح ينسحب الووتر أيضا، فالأوزمولاريتي راح تبقى ايزوتونيك، تبقى the same، تبقى 300 نفس الأوزمولاريتي مال البلازما along the proximal tubule because the reabsorption of water of the proximal tubule proportional to the sodium reabsorption. The high capacity of the proximal tubule لأنه 65% حيصير reabsorption. High capacity of this proximal tubule من جاي it result from the special characteristic of its epithelial cell اللي هي their cell is highly metabolic and they have large number of the mitochondria for active transport and they have an extensive brush border at the luminal side of the membrane and have extensive labyrinth of intracellular and basal channels which provide an extensive membrane surface area on the luminal and basolateral side of the epithelium. بما انه موجود هاي اللابرنث extensive راح تعطينا مساحة كبيرة for reabsorption. Also at the brush border there is located carrier protein. الكارير بروتين هذا كلش يساعد بالreabsorption. This is the proximal tubule, 65% reabsorption of sodium and water, in addition to reabsorption of the chloride, glucose, amino acid and bicarbonate. هذا السهم يدل على reabsorption from the tubular fluid to the tubular cell. وهذا السهم يدل بالعكس secretion of the hydrogen ion and other organic acid and bases to the tubular fluid. هذا type of the cell. هذه brush border. هاي between it there is labyrinth اللي يزيد لنا surface area of the inner side or apical side of the or luminal side of the tubular cell. The reabsorption and secretion of the proximal tubule as follow. It divided into proximal tubule divided into two parts. First half of it and the second half of the proximal tubule. In the first half of the proximal tubule, sodium is co-transported with it glucose in addition to the amino acid. In the second half of the proximal tubule, a little glucose and amino acid اللي بقى من the first half will reabsorb as well in the second half of our proximal tubule. In addition, the sodium here mainly will reabsorb with the chloride as a high chloride concentration at this area. بالنسبة للبايكربونات and potassium are reabsorbed from proximal tubule as well مثل ما حكينا قبل شوية. Proximal tubule is moderately passively reabsorbed for urea. يعني راح اليوريا هوني نخليها ببالكم لأنه راح نحكي عنها ديتيل بالمستقبل. اليوريا هوني moderately and passively will reabsorb. Sodium is reabsorbed by the counter transport secreting hydrogen ion into the tubular lumen. بالنسبة للصوديوم راح لما ينتقل الكاونتر ترانسبورت with it hydrogen ion. هاي الحالة نسميها as hydrogen secreted to the tubular lumen. The proximal tubule is also the site for secretion of another substance اللي هي organic acid and bases, for example bile salt, oxalate, ureate, catecholamine, in addition to the drugs, toxin and para-aminohippuric acid. Para-aminohippuric acid, the average person can clear about 90% of the para-aminohippuric acid from the plasma flowing through the kidney and excrete it in the urine. So para-aminohippuric acid clearance is used to estimate the renal plasma flow. يعني هاي المادة لأنه 90% يصير بها clear from the or filtered و pass through the kidney and excreted to the urine, ولهذا يستخدمون هذه المادة for estimation of the renal plasma. Solute and water transport in the loop of Henle. Solute and water transport in the loop of Henle. هسه نحكي عن الجزء الثاني من ال renal tubule اللي هو اللوب اوف هنلي. مثل ما عرفتم عندنا descending and ascending part، عندنا thin descending and thin lower half of the ascending loop of Henle and the upper part of the ascending loop of Henle is thick. فكل واحد له مواصفات معينة وكل part له selectivity for reabsorption and secretion of the substance. Now we will talk about the solute and water transport in the loop of Henle. The thin descending and thin ascending segment of the loop of Henle have thin characteristic مالتها thin epithelial membrane with no brush border. شوفوا هوني thin epithelial, no brush border, have few mitochondria and minimal level of the metabolic activity. يعني characteristic تختلف كثير عن ال proximal tubule. While in the descending thin segment, in the descending thin segment, about 20% hypermeability of the filtered water is reabsorbed by, but it is moderately permeable to urea and sodium. بالنسبة لهاي نقطة مهمة إنه in the descending thin segment, especially in the thin segment, the descending part of the loop of Henle، هذه الجزء كلش permeable for water. مهمة أيضا راح نحكيها بالمستقبل. So about 20% of the filtered water is reabsorbed. زين، ولكن هذا الجزء it is moderately permeable to urea and sodium. The ascending lip, including both thin and thick portion, is impermeable to water. اوكي، هاي الملاحظة أيضا مهمة. The ascending part إذا كان thin وإذا كان thick هو impermeable to water. هون راح نشوف هذه ال thin descending loop of Henle اللي هو كلش permeable to water. شوف الصورة وضح لكم إنه الوتر هو هوني أكثر شيء يصير له absorption إذا thin descending loop of Henle. شوف السيل مالتها ما بيها brush border، فيه metabolic مثل ما ذكرنا. The thick segment of the loop of Henle has thick epithelial cell that have high metabolic activity. إذا الثick راح تكون عنده high metabolic activity of itself. About 25% of the filtered load of the sodium, chloride and potassium are reabsorbed in the loop of Henle, mostly in the thick ascending lip of the loop of Henle. هاي أيضا نقطة مهمة. هاي نقطة مهمة أنه 25% من الفلتر load of the sodium and chloride and potassium will reabsorbed in the loop of Henle. وأيضا هاي مهمة بالمستقبل لما راح نحتاجها نحكيها بالمستقبل. زين، خلوها ببالكم. the thin segment of the ascending limb has a much lower reabsorptive capacity than thick segment. يعني thin segment of the ascending limb is lower reabsorptive capacity. أهم شيء reabsorption بالنسبة للصوديوم and chloride and البوتاسيوم هو بالثيك part. هذا الثيك ascending loop of Henle 25% at this area will reabsorb sodium, chloride and potassium, and this is the thin descending and this is the thin ascending. Both thin ascending and thick ascending, it is not permeable for water. Okay. In the thick ascending lip, the sodium is reabsorbed by the co-transporter, which called 1 sodium, 2 chloride, and 1 potassium co-transporter. يعني have one side for sodium, 2 side for chloride, and 1 side for potassium co-transporter. By it, the energy from downhill sodium reabsorption drive the potassium reabsorption uphill. يعني الانرجي من بانتقال الصوديوم من التركيز العالي الى التركيز الواطي راح يعطي انرجي، راح ينقل معاه البوتاسيوم بالعكس من التركيز القليل الى التركيز العالي. This action is inhibited by the loop diuretic called furosemide, and another co-transporter. The sodium is reabsorbed by another transporter which called sodium hydrogen counter transport mechanism. 2 sides at this transporter, one for sodium in one direction and hydrogen will be in the counter direction. بالعكس راح ينقل من الtubular cell إلى الtubular fluid. There is a paracellular reabsorption of magnesium, calcium, sodium, and potassium in the thick segment due to the relative more positive charge in the lumen than interstitial fluid due to a slight back leak of the potassium ion into the lumen. This picture show the transporter. This code transport 1 sodium, 2 chloride, 1 potassium, all in the same direction. وهذه counter transport sodium from high to low concentration, give a kinetic energy to the hydrogen ion to transport in the counter way. زين. ايضا عندنا المغنيسيوم والكالسيوم والصوديوم والكلورايد والترانسبورت by the paracellular diffusion. Now we will talk about the distal tubule. The first portion of the distal tubule is part of the juxtaglomerular complex اللي حكينا عنها سابقا. The next part is the early distal tubule. Is highly convoluted and reabsorbs sodium, potassium, and chloride, but it is impermeable to water and urea. So it is diluting segment. يعني the first or early نسمينه early distal tubule راح يصير بينه ايضا reabsorption، تكمله الريابسوربشن اللي صار سابقا بالنسبه للصوديوم والبوتاسيوم. هو هون راح يصير reabsorption for sodium, potassium and chloride، ولكن لا يصير بينه reabsorption لا لليوريا ولا للووتر. So it is diluting segment لانه راح ياخذ بس املاح وما ياخذ ووتر، فخفف لنا الفلويد. About 5% of the sodium chloride is reabsorbed in the early distal tubule. By sodium chloride co-transporter, which is inhibited here by the thiazide diuretic اللي يعني هاي بالأدوية تستفادون منها حتى بس أنا just for knowledge يعني قلت أنتم ما مسؤولين عن الأدوية حاليا، ولكن حتى لما تدرسون الأدوية تتذكرون لعل وعسى إنه هذا الجزء. وهذه الصورة شوفكم الايرلي ديستال تيوبيول، هذا البارت ايرلي ديستال بعد الجلكستان glomerular. هذا early distal tubule. هذا راح يكون الريابسوربشن هوني الصوديوم كلورايد زين mainly مثل ما قلنا لا اكو ووتر ولا اكو يوريا. هوني شوفوا هذه الكارير بروتين راح تنقل لنا الصوديوم عند الكلورايد كو ترانسبورت وراح يشتغل عليها ثيازايد دايوريتك inhibited this transport زين حتى لما يصير inhibition فما يمتص الصوديوم. هذا الصوديوم يضطر انه ينزل باليورين ف it's important for hypertensive. هاي الكلورايد راح تنتقل at the basolateral by the chloride channel مثل ما حكينا عنه. Late distal tubule and cortical collecting tubule both of them have the same function. ايش الفانكشن مالتهم؟ اول نقطة مهمة انه كلاهما have two types of the cell اللي هي principal cell and intercalated cells. ايش هي مواصفات البرنسبل cell؟ at the principal cell will reabsorb the sodium and secrete potassium. High reabsorption of the sodium and secretion of the potassium depending on the sodium potassium ATPase pump and concentration gradient مثل ما حكينا عنه سابقا بالاكتيف ترانسبورت. زين under the effect under the effect of the aldosterone hormone يعني الالدوسترون هرمون يتحكم بهذا reabsorption. So principal cell reabsorbs water as well. This is the late distal tubule and collecting tubule. This is the principal cell. This is the intercalated cell. See, and the principal cell will be reabsorption of the sodium and the chloride and secretion of the potassium, and at the intercalated cell will be secretion of the hydrogen ion and reabsorption of the bicarbonate and potassium. At the late distal tubule and collecting tubule will be reabsorption of water under the effect of the antidiuretic hormone. At the principal cell will be reabsorption of the sodium and secretion of the potassium اللي اعتماده الأصلي على الصوديوم potassium ATPase اللي under control of the aldosterone. ولهذا الالدوسترون antagonist مثل spironolactone will inhibit this sodium potassium ATPase pump, and it's important in the treatment of the hypertensive. Also, sodium channels blocker work at this part of the tubule. The intercalated cell secrete hydrogen ion by hydrogen ATPase and reabsorb both bicarbonate and potassium ion مثل ما شفنا قبل شوية بالصورة. الصفة الثانية important in the distal tubule and collecting tubule هي it is almost completely impermeable to urea. It is impermeable to urea. ثالثا, the permeability of both segment to water is controlled by the concentration of the antidiuretic hormone اللي نسمينه vasopressin. لما يكون high level of the antidiuretic hormone, this tubule segment will permeable to water. But in the absence of the antidiuretic hormone, this part of the tubule will be almost impermeable to water. Medullary collecting duct. It is the final site to process the urine and reabsorb less than 10% of the filtered water and sodium. The epithelial cells of it are nearly cuboidal with a smooth surface and relatively few mitochondria. And the characteristic of the medullary collecting duct, it is so important. First of all, the permeability of it to water is controlled by the level of the antidiuretic hormone. Increased antidiuretic hormone means increases the permeability to water, forming concentrated urine. النقطة الثانية, it is permeable to urea, important in concentrated urine. كلش مهمة هاي النقطة, إنه هذا الميدلري collecting duct it is permeable to urea, وحنقول نستفاد من هاي المعلومة in the future. ثالث نقطة it secretes hydrogen ion against large concentration gradient, so it is important in acid-base balance. See this part of the medullary. هذه medullary collecting duct. See at this part have a cubital cell, smooth cell. At this part will be reabsorption mainly of the water and under the effect of the antidiuretic hormone. أيضا reabsorption it is permeable to urea مهمة. أيضا at this part of the at this medullary collecting duct will be secretion of the hydrogen ion against high concentration gradient, so it is important in acid-base balance. Concentration of the different solute in the different tubular segment. A solute, for example sodium, concentration in the tubular fluid is determined by its degree of reabsorption versus water reabsorption. Inulin is not reabsorbed or secreted by the renal tubule, so its concentration reflects water reabsorption at different part of the renal tubule. Thank you.